Thank you everyone for turning up. So just to fill you in a little bit on who I am and who we are as a company, as a great introduction, but just so people know. Industrial Inkjet Limited, who I work for, is a privately owned company, but we are the sales and support channel for Konica Minolta inkjet products outside of Asia. So we've been working with Konica Minolta for around 12, 13 years. We also, as we said, make our own range of print modules with the Konica Minolta heads, so that puts us in a unique position where we can see the benefits, sometimes the flaws, but usually the benefits of using the technology. So you can see from my slide there, I've changed roles this year. So I used to be Director of Technology. I'm now Director of Business Development, which basically means instead of having to answer really hard technical questions and make technical decisions, I go to networking events and like other people's stuff on LinkedIn. So that's basically what I do now. So I'll take you through my presentation. Basically, it's called Making the Most of Konica Minolta's Compact Inkjet Printhead Technology. Now, of course, it's the IJC, so this isn't a sales pitch, and I know there's other printheads out there, so you can make the most of other people's printheads, but in my humble opinion, they're just awesome, so you should just use the Konica ones. Yeah. So I'm going to start off just giving you a brief insight into Konica's history of innovation in inkjet. I won't bore you with a history lesson, but I will just take you through where they've come from. And then a little bit about how that makes integration easier, because that's what I feel is a very important part. Then, crucially, the main point of heads. So I'll explain what we mean by that, and a lot of you will be thinking, why do I care? So I'll be also explaining why that matters as well. And then finally, probably why most of our competitors are here, and some people in the audience as well, is to find out what we're doing now and in the near future. So like I said, brief history lesson. So actually, I was surprised to learn this myself. Konica have been had their first inkjet patent in 1977. So it's over 40 years that they've been in the inkjet business. So skipping out a few of the early years, they developed their first OEM printheads at the turn of the century, and then importantly in 2005 the KM512 was launched. I'll go into that a little bit in a moment, which is still selling well today. And then as we go through, the KM1024 arrived, giving it a wider head than the 1024i, making it faster, 3 times faster. And then the 1800i, which is actually a personal favourite of mine, and we do a lot of work with the 1800i. And then this year, we've brought out the compact recirculating printhead, which I'll talk a bit more about later. And for next year, there'll also be some information. Just a note as well, it's not just about the printheads. Konica is essentially a chemicals company, and they do a lot of ink innovation. And they have a technology called a gel UV ink. Now, as any of you that have used a Konica head will know, they come with an inbuilt heater, and they have quite a wide range of temperatures they can handle. So KM developed this ink technology actually for the KM1, which runs at around 80, 85 degrees C with a phase change ink, which means it's self-pinning, so it's much better for a wider range of materials. And actually this year, KM have told us that they can actually start selling this ink outside of the KM1, so it will be available for other people, for other applications should they want it, and they can support on ink supply design, etc., because with something like this, it is a little more complex than a standard ink system. So that's a little bit about KM. So from now on, this is more from my experience. There will be some information about the heads, but mainly about our experience as an integrator and what we think is important, and we find our customers who buy the print heads feel is important. What's important? The big one is DPI. Everyone is saying, my DPI is better than your DPI, I've got 1200, I've got 1600, I've got whatever it is. It's a real mine's bigger than yours kind of thing. It's not always the most important thing. If you look at carton printing, there's 1200 DPI carton printers out there, which I'm sure are brilliant and lovely. But in my view, the best one out there is 360 DPI, and it's if you look at the Nozomi, it's not using KM heads, but I think that's an awesome product. It's using a 360 DPI head. It's right for the market. It's not always about the DPI. I went to ITMA this year and saw people printing on loose woven fabrics with 1200 DPI. For me, that's insanity. That's just over-speccing the product. So some applications, flexible packaging, high-end stuff, does need high DPI, but not everything does. So it's important to bear that in mind. Is it about the jetting frequency? Again, this macho thing of, oh, mine's faster than yours. Okay, some people love a Ferrari. I wouldn't go and pick my kids up from school in one. Well, they'd love it, but I wouldn't. So it's all about what makes sense for the application. And then we get to drop size. Now, we do a lot of work in the security printing market, and in that market, drop size is really important. What we can see here, probably can't reach that side, but never mind. If I'm printing on a cardboard box, putting a barcode on, the last thing I want to do is print that small. So it does actually matter completely on what you're doing with it. Cost per nozzle. This is a particular one. I've seen it come up in a few of the other presentations. So there is a demand for the market. It has to be cheaper, has to be cheaper, has to be cheaper. What the integrators have to realize is this stuff is cripplingly expensive to develop and manufacture. You've only got to look at what happened to some of my colleagues not far from us in Cambridge recently to show what can happen. It is really difficult and expensive stuff to develop. And in any industry, everyone's got to make a buck. Everyone's got to have a piece of the pie. So a constant squeeze on cost per nozzle, for me, is probably pushing the industry the wrong way. And we'll end up with less players in the market, less competition, and then it will just rebound in everyone's faces. So cost per print is, of course, important because it reaches more applications, but it's not the only thing. And you have to look at the total cost of ownership and the benefits that the application brings. So now we move on to actually what I think is the key thing, ease of integration. Ease of integration makes everyone's life easier. I like an easy life. You can see that by my changing career. So anything we can do to make it easier to integrate the heads is a benefit to the industry as a whole, gets things working quicker and easier. So what does make integration easier? So there's a very old principle, the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, bit insulting, but it's still true. We are firm believers in that in TheIJC. We keep everything as simple as possible in order to make it more robust, more reliable, easier to develop. So simple ink systems. If we don't need to recirculate, we don't. If we do, we do. It just matters for the application, but keep it simple if you can. The mechanical adjustments of the print heads, again, if you can keep it as simple as possible, there's not as much to go wrong. Waveforms. I'll give you an example here. Konica Minolta recently took over the Panasonic printhead business, and when they looked under the hood, they found that they were tuning waveforms to every single customer for every single color of every single ink for every single application. That's insanity. What KM do is they produce a robust waveform with a few variants that are easy to work with, easy to develop with, and that's a far better way to work. It makes everything easier. Also, a compatibility with a wide range of fluids. If you have a new printhead come in and you've got to reformulate all your inks, it is such a pain. It's so expensive. Integration easier, and the Konica heads with the inbuilt heater and the ability to work with a wide range of chemistries makes that easier. Then we talk about peripheral products. If you add more peripheral products to your integration, it makes the whole thing more complex. It has to, because there's more stuff. The more complex the system, the longer the R&D cycle, so you're later to market, and it's going to be more expensive. So it's a negative, it's not a positive. And the more complex the system you build, the more potential there is for failure, the more there is to go wrong. So again, this whole keep it simple profile means that there's less to go wrong, it's more robust in the field. So things like pinning, anyone that's been to an TheIJC talk ever in the last 10 years will know we absolutely hate pinning. And sorry for the guys from Fosun in the back. But we basically, we compact everything very close together. We take out the pinning lamps. It means we can be much simpler compact modules. Software corrections for variations in print density. Yes, they're great. They're fantastic technology. We even work with some of ourselves. But if you don't need it, it's a complication you can live without. And again, unnecessary recirculation. If I don't need to recirculate, it takes a hell of a lot of cost out of my machine. So then let's look at how KM has made life easier. So in 2005, they brought out the KM 512. I came to Industrial Inkjet a few years after this from ZAR, and I was astounded how easy these heads were to just fill and run. They just worked out of the box, just worked. And it was an epiphany for me. It was kind of, wow, this is how inkjet should be, and it's carried on like that. Now, there are a lot of inkjet heads out there that you can do the same with that now, but the point is, the ease of integration made such a difference. There was a flaw, however, and that is that the way that they'd packaged the adjustment features meant that you couldn't make a compact module. So a year later, they developed a much narrower head, so 15 millimeters of print width and to get a 360 DPI head, which was a really, really neat package. And we started selling into wide format printing, direct to shape printing, because the product was so small, it could go into a lot more applications. Then in 2008, they brought out the 1024 head, which followed the same line. Now, what I would say with the 512, the thinner 512, they reduced it to one ink port, which meant integration slightly less easy. So when they went up to the 1024, they put it back, and that made it a much better and easier head to use. It's still used today. And this was then the blueprint for moving to a printhead. I'm not going to go through this line by line, there's too much on here, but basically, this is just to point out over the years in keeping the size of the printhead very small. So we have back here, we have the 15 millimeter 360 DPI head. When they went out to a 72 millimeter head, it went up to 17.6 millimeters, still very narrow. When they converted it to an I series, so that's 3 times faster, there's now 4 rows rather than 2 rows, but still kept that same size of less than 20 millimeters. Then came along the idea of making a 600 DPI head, and guess what? They still managed to get it below 20 millimeters in even with 6 rows of actuators. And then we move on to the one that we're starting to roll out now, which is the recirculation head. Again, it's 360 DPI, it's 4 rows with nozzle level recirculation, and it's still less than 20 millimeters. It's a really tiny product. So how does that stack up against the market? So what I've looked at here is looking at some of the KM range and some of the alternatives. If you look at the ones in the yellowy orange colour, they're recirculating heads, because naturally anything with recirculation tends to be slightly bigger. And you can see that the KM options are way slimmer, narrower, more compact than anything out there. The only possible exception is a newcomer up here at 1200 DPI, and I'm not going to name who the competitors are, but that just shows you that other people are taking this seriously and showing that it actually does matter keeping a compact footprint. So why does that matter? Why do I care about a compact footprint? If we look at one example, which is the scanning printer. So you see at the top of the slide, you can see a picture of the Swiss Q-Print machine. Swiss Q-Print are a great partner of ours. They make probably one of the best wide format machines out there, certainly highest quality. The compact structure gives them 2 benefits. One is that you end up with a much neater packaged module, so your scanning width is less. That means that your cross member is shorter, can be cheaper, less robust for the same quality, makes the machine cheaper, makes the whole footprint smaller. An important one as well, and that Swiss Q have told us time and time again, is bidirectional printing is much easier. Because when you're coming backwards and forwards, if you've got a longer scan width, it just makes everything that much harder to make sure you get absolute accuracy of the machine. So a slimmer head makes a difference. So this gives a high quality, higher productivity because you haven't got to scan as far, and lower cost because it's a smaller machine. So it's a win-win-win. Then we look at the direct-to-shape market. Everyone's talking about the direct-to-shape. It's a very, very strong market for Konica Minolta. We can see that the small distance between rows means we can print very small radiuses. So we've got if I can get it out of my pocket, we've got a customer printing with a 600 dpi head, and they're printing narrow tubes, well, this one here, that you couldn't do with any other technology. Also, you can use all the nozzles at the same time. I've seen machines out there which use single rows of a print head to do this, which is just completely wasteful and, in my view, stupid. So close together, and you can get around these radiuses. It makes a big difference to what they do. So guess what? Again, it gives higher quality, higher productivity, and lower cost of the machine. If you look at single pass on the web, so this is something that Industrial Inkjet are very strong on. So if you look here at the bottom, there's one of our inkjet modules. This is a 4-color module, 600 dpi, 4-color labeling module, sitting on top of a Marcandi press. If you look at the top, you can see that we can stack the heads very close together to get that compact structure. Why does that matter? It takes up a lot less space on a machine. So you can convert an old press to be in digital. We couldn't do that with another printhead. Not easily. You end up with a massive area. You take up a lot more of the machine than you would with our modules. Also, because the heads are closer together, it's more resilient to speed changes and web wander than another option, so it increases the quality. And because we don't need an arch, because it's so compact, it takes a lot of the complexity out of the conversion process, which means, guess what, again, it gives higher quality, higher productivity, and lower cost. So, if you look here, TheIJC, we make compact modules that go into a whole range of products, whether it's automation, whether it's a sheet-fed machine, whether it's a web-fed machine. We simply couldn't do that if we used another printhead. So yes, of course, we sell the KM printheads, so we're loyal to them. We don't have to use their printheads. We actually can use any ones we want to. We choose to because they allow our business to do what we do. I want to briefly talk about the 1800i. It's a 600 dpi head. It's not widely adopted, I have to admit that, in the market. I think it's quite underrated. Anyone that's used it realises how fast and how productive it is. It's 600 dpi at 81 kilohertz, so it's a little rocket of a head. We print up to 200 meters per minute colour UV images. Of course, it depends on the substrate. That's on something like an absorbent substrate. If we're printing on a film, we're nearer 100 meters per minute. But it's with UV ink, it's a very high-speed printer. It's got 6 straight rows of nozzles, so there's no worries about any structure in the printing, any speed variation, so we can just accelerate through the print without a problem. It has a high temperature tolerance, so we can use thicker inks, things like low migration inks that may be more viscous than standard UV inks, without an issue. And there are literally thousands of these in the field. You don't know about it because most of them actually are in KM product. But there are thousands in the field, and we've got maybe a dozen or so OEMs using the one. Now, there is a video on here, and I'll warn you, this might be quite loud, so if it becomes quite loud, I'll just skip it. But this is just to show you exactly what we're doing with it. Oh, there's no sound. That's probably a blessing, because it is very loud. So basically, this is, it's in our lab. This is, say, a full-color printer, printing at 200 meters per minute, full graphic images. So, from a product point of view, we find it a very strong product. And in fact, it's a lot of markets we can put this into. So now, excuse the Dutch, but I couldn't find an English expression that said the same thing. So, and for those Dutch speakers out there, I'm going to murder your language. So, new wine in oude flessen means new wine in old bottles. Is that what we're talking about? When we're developing new heads in Konica, they look the same, they feel the same, so are they really different? Well, the answer is they are, but what we're doing is we're utilising the same profile, the same design ideas, and advancing the technology, but making it so that our customers can upgrade easily. So Konica are adding nozzle level recirculation, which I'll talk about in a moment, improved drop accuracy with silicon nozzle plates, higher throughput with analog electronics. I'm not going to talk about this one too much. I mean, it's being adopted in Asia. We don't see it that much in the West. But so this is a 6 picoliter, 360 DPI head with an analog driver, which just means we can get more throughput of ink. It's also got a silicon nozzle plate, so we get much better drop accuracy. And as I say, it's getting adopted by a lot of wide format guys out in China. But this one, for me, is more interesting. So Konica are releasing the new recirculating head, and as you can see, it has possibly the snappiest title of any print head out there. Who needs your Starfire when you can have the KM1024ALG Not exactly rolls off the tongue, but anyway. It is tiny for a recirculating head. It's only 19.5 millimeters. And it has a dual recirculation channel, which I'll show you a quick video of in a moment to show you how that works. And it's an analog driver, so we get really good productivity out of it. Is this going to run? Here we go. So actually, part of this was shown last year by John, who gave the talk, but this is just to explain. So you've actually got 2 recirculation channels for each nozzle, which we find works very well for clearing debris, clearing air out of the nozzles. And they've managed to do this, as I say, in a very, very compact design. There's a filter on the side with a large filter area. It's even with that filter, we do believe it's the thinnest recirculating head of its type on the market. There's a low pressure loss because of the way they've designed the filter and the flow path, and a large filter area. So initially, they're putting this head into specialty ceramics market. So the high throughput and the filter is important. In terms of throughput, at 8 drop per dot, we can get 6 kilohertz. At 3 drop per dot, we can get 80 picoliters at 14 kilohertz. So it really is for high laydown applications. Where do we see it being used? Well, initially it's going in, as I say, into some ceramic applications. And these are actually specialty applications, specialty varnishes and things like that. And it's where people want a bolt-on accessory. So again, this idea of a slim product, a compact module comes into play even there. Also, things like labeling and direct-to-print with white. Because it's narrow, we can do direct-to-product white very easily with it. And we've had a lot of requests as well from additive manufacturing for the same reasons. So now I want to introduce something new. So this hasn't been widely touted around yet, but Konica are releasing next year a new printhead. It's called the KM1280 IMHH, which we'll just end up calling the KM1280. And where does it sit? Well, if you look at the market progression, everything was 180 DPI, 360 DPI, then there was the jump to 600, 1200, unless you include the one type family of heads which did the 100, 300, etc. route. Now, typically, the lower resolution were a larger drop size, the higher resolution, small drop size, mainly for different applications. But what they're doing is developing something that fits in the middle here. So it's a 450 nozzle per inch head. So why do we think this is going to be important? Well, if you look at this graphic, so if you're printing at 600 DPI with a small drop size, yes, you can get some very fine details, you get some very nice print, but one of the difficulties is you're limited to quite a short print distance. So at high speed printing, higher print distances, it can be an issue. If you go to a larger drop size, you lose the print quality, but you've got the print distance. With this head, it's got a 10 picoliter native drop size, 450 nozzles per inch. We believe you can get the best of both worlds, or close as you can to it. You can still get detailed print, you can still get a decent print distance. So for things like the direct-to-shape market, we believe this will be a good product. Here's a look at the specification. So it's we're looking to release it for single pass applications only next year. The drive electronics have already been developed by some of the leading drive electronics suppliers, because actually there's a very small change from the 1024 up to the 1280. And it's the same size, we'll show that in a moment, as the KM1024i printhead, so it will actually fit into the same slot. More nozzles into a smaller space, so it's still a 4-row, it's still independent channel head, but it's now a higher resolution, but fitting into the same compact area. To do that, it actually wasn't that easy. There was some technology they had to develop and work on, mainly to do with getting the pitch of the wire bonds and the holes and everything. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but basically they have done an awful lot of work over the years, as they always do, with actually getting things closer and closer and tighter to make that happen. So what do we see as the applications? Well, if I look from my side of things as an integrator, we're looking at single pass variable data as quite a strong market for it. We can get higher resolution codes and finer text and better wetting with this than we can at the 360 dpi head. It's a large enough drop that we can use for high speed printing, and a higher print gap, so that's a benefit. And it's got a silicon nozzle plate, so we'll get even better accuracy. The potential for white and spot varnish as well, just by the nature of the drop size and the DPI. And we think for direct to product, where people are struggling to adopt the 600 DPI small drop stuff, that this will actually help them. And we've had a lot of interest as well from the materials deposition side for thin film encapsulation, solder mask and legend printing applications, where they can see this is an upgrade from the 360 DPI option. So to sum up, KM heads are very compact. That I've said ad nauseum in here. They're easy to use. They are very easy to use. They're very reliable. They're high quality. So all the things you want as an integrator that make life easy for you. We've demonstrated by our product range we can do an awful lot of markets with the same products. And with the new heads they're bringing out, we think there'll be a whole new range of applications that we can actually adopt, and we look forward to working on them. So thank you for listening, and any questions?